Now that was not exactly what I was expecting or hoping for out of the sixth out of 8 episodes this season. I kind of thought that after how last week's episode went, how it sort of tied up and brought together everything from the first 4 episodes, how at long last the point of the season had finally come into focus, about retaking Mandalore and how Bo-Katan sort of ascended to a leadership role again, not to mention learning Moff Gideon had indeed escaped or perhaps had been abducted by angry Mandalorians. Anyway, after, for the most part, last week's episode making sense of the first 4 episodes, I thought we were on track for the rest of the season, that we'd spend the final 3 episodes primarily setting up and heading towards some type of big resolution or epic finale, likely involving the aforementioned Moff Gideon. I thought for sure we'd see him this week. That we'd gotten to the part of the season I think most of us had been kind of waiting for, that things were about to get really, really interesting and kicked into high gear. And though, yes, there was a pretty major event or progression of the larger story of the Mandalorians at the very end, which we'll talk about in just a moment since there's honestly not a whole lot else story-wise to talk about, and even though the opening sequence was also good and showed us what Bo's former followers were up to, as well as showing us a Quarren and Mon Calamari that were in love, which is, sure, it's great to see for fans of the Clone Wars Water Wars story arc, or who know the long, tense history between these two races that share a homeworld. Not to mention, I liked her aquarium-like captain's chair. I thought that was pretty cool. Anyway, even though the brief beginning and end were all well and good, the middle and bulk of this episode ended up feeling like a colorful, cameo-filled episode of Scooby-Doo. Heck, it was so cameo-filled that I half expected the Harlem Globetrotters to show up and lend a hand, or at least to have some tea with Lizzo and Jack Black, who felt plucked right out of a bad remake of Alice in Wonderland. But seriously here, I didn't hate the middle section as much as it really did feel like pure, unadulterated filler that you were supposed to like because of prequel-era callbacks. But to me, it was like they didn't know what else to do with this episode where they wanted Bo-Katan to meet back up with her old followers. Like, they knew they wanted to have this kind of epic fight between her and Axe Wolves, and that they wanted Din to give her the Darksaber back in the end. They just didn't know what the heck else to do with the episode, so we got this. And yes, there was some entertainment value to the middle section and some interesting crumbs of information to be learned about the New Republic's amnesty program that Jack Black, Captain Bombardier or something like that. Anyway, as part of the program, he was sent to Plazier 15 to help rebuild the planet. But since he's there, the planet's not allowed to have any type of military or even armed constables, and thus they hired the Mandalorians as protection, but can't have those protectors enter the city to take care of their droid problem, even though they could hire other Mandalorians to come in and do that on a technicality, which makes me think they could have just hired a couple of the Mandalorians they had as protectors to come in and do that. Regardless of that, it's a droid problem that has been created by Christopher Lloyd, or Commissioner Hellgate if you prefer, who is a former separatist and wanted to... I'm not exactly sure what his plan was. He didn't like Jack Black, but he did like Lizzo and her family, so I think he just wanted to take the planet back by force in the name of democracy. He said that was what he was fighting for, or always had been fighting for. Even though the planet had been a monarchy and recently voted for the first time and voted for Jack Black and Lizzo, so yeah, I guess that's what he was trying to do, and he would have gotten away with it if it wasn't for those pesky Mandalorians. Other than that, in regards to the middle section at least, again, plenty of fun kind of callbacks. I liked seeing battle droids. Matthew Wood as the voice of a B1 was nice to see or hear, I guess. I appreciated that it wasn't just another gray or tan dirt and sand planet, that there was quite a bit of color in this episode, and overall it looked really good. I thought a lot of really nice effects and so on here, a lot of aliens and shiny droids and nice things to look at, I suppose. Also, Din's hatred of droids, especially battle droids, was a nice reminder of where he came from.
What do you think?
You had me at battle droids.
That his parents were, of course, killed by battle droids during the Clone Wars until he was saved by Mandalorians by Death Watch and became a foundling. Moving on to the ending, then I guess. I enjoyed the fight between Bo-Katan and Axe Wolves. Thought it was well done, or well choreographed. It seemed like two pretty elite Mandalorians going toe-to-toe. And I found it interesting that Din waited until now, this very crucial moment, to give Bo the Darksaber back, when he'd clearly long since realized that she had defeated one who had defeated him and had earned it back. And I'm curious if she, Bo-Katan, had realized or thought of that before this moment, considering this is, well, it's something we fans have been kind of wondering about and debating since that episode, if that counted as something that wins her back the Darksaber. Or if maybe, I don't know, she didn't want to have to resort to using it to lead once again. She did mention in that first episode how all you have to do is wave the thing around and they'll follow you. Or if she really did feel done with wanting to lead and had no interest anymore, or told herself she didn't want to lead anymore until the mythosaur started to change her mind. Or maybe she did realize that she kind of won it back on a technicality, but she didn't want to do it that way, especially considering the last time someone handed it back to her, that being Sabine, how that all worked out. She wanted to earn it back in a more worthy way, you could say. I don't know, but to me this all came off feeling kind of clunky. If I was one of the other Mandalorians at that moment, or Axe Wolves, I would have asked why had he been holding on to the Darksaber all this time if she had earned it back from him. Not to mention, for better or worse, this all felt like Din Djarin officially handing the show over to her. I mean, the only sort of goal he has at this point is to help her. And I get the feeling he may end up doing a little more for the rest of the season, but standing at her side as she rounds up more Mandalorians. Along with this, Grogu was once again nothing more than a cute prop to do adorable things that could have been removed entirely from the episode without changing a single thing. I know Favreau recently said that the decision to bring him back so soon was entirely his own, that there was no sort of outside pressure from anyone to do so, but so far he's brought him back simply to give us a flashback that, though cool to see Ahmed Best again, especially as a Jedi, it does little or nothing for the character of Grogu, actually. It didn't add to his story, it only clarified what Jedi had saved him. We already knew a Jedi had saved him. As I've said before, that was a far, far bigger moment for the actor Ahmed Best, and cool for him, don't get me wrong, but it was a far bigger moment for him than it was for the character of Grogu in this show. Other than that flashback then, pointing to a planet on a screen has been about the only thing of significance he's truly done this season, and his training to become a Mandalorian has amounted to a 2-minute dart duel with another foundling. Oh, and he got another piece of armor from the armorer for reasons, probably so Hasbro can repackage the figure with an extra piece of 10-cent plastic and charge collectors another $25 for a new version of Grogu. And though I do like Favreau and want to take him at his word when it comes to bringing the little fella back being his decision, not that I'd fault him for not wanting to admit Disney encouraged him to bring back Grogu, or that Disney would want him to admit that, but so far it feels like there was no reason whatsoever to include him in this season. To be blunt, he's done almost nothing as a character and added nothing to Din's virtually non-existent story this season. And sure, in theory, this could all change in the final 2 episodes. It could be all about Din and Grogu growing together or something. But if he is such an integral part of the story, as many have argued he is, then it shouldn't take till the bitter end of the season for that to become evident. And if you were waiting for the end of the season to do that, why not just save his reunion for the back half of this season of The Mandalorian instead of inserting it into the Book of Boba Fett? Why not take out the Scooby-Doo portion of this episode and replace it with the Luke Grogu training stuff from the Book of Boba Fett, and then have the reunion in one of the final 2 episodes of this season, and then have it feel much, much more impactful overall, I think. But I digress. And so in closing, this was an episode that I didn't hate, but I certainly didn't love for a couple different reasons. For one, the cameos were a bit off-putting. There was a reason why George Lucas shied away from using famous actors, and that's because he knew the real-life person could be a distraction from the character he wanted them to portray. And for me, that was the case here. That felt like Jack Black, not some former Imperial captain. Also, unless we're in for some type of major twist in the end, which is possible, like Bo-Katan going rogue and Din having to fight her to take the Darksaber back, for better or worse, Bo-Katan is now the Mandalorian. This is now her show. And mind you, I've liked her story this season. I like the character. I like what they're doing with her. It's probably been the most interesting part of the season. I just hate that it comes at the expense of Din Djarin. I hate that he, like Grogu, could almost be removed at this point, and we don't lose all that much for the overarching story. Well, that is all I've got for you this time. This was a shorter review, but honestly, there wasn't a whole lot to talk about with this one unless we want to get into all the Easter eggs and little fun things from the Scooby-Doo portion of the episode. But I'm sure plenty of other channels will do just that. And so, take to the comments below now and tell me what you thought of this episode. Did you enjoy this one? Did you find it pretty boring or useless? Maybe you just enjoyed the beginning or the end. Whatever the case may be, leave your comments below and let's talk some Star Wars. And until next time, thanks for watching.